Hi guys, this is a more personal video that I'm making, and it's about something that happened on Saturday. See, on Saturday morning, bright and early, I woke up and I got a DM from a friend of mine, Dr. Benway, as a matter of fact, who I'm still friendly with, and of course, I talk to all the time with, and maybe we'll be doing a podcast again, maybe not, it doesn't matter. But the point is, he told me that Neil Peart, the drummer for Rush, had passed away, that the announcement had been made and that he had died the previous Tuesday. And my Saturday morning here in Kharkov, I heard about it, and it just really, it hit me hard. It hit me really hard. And so I'd been thinking that I was going to do a whole series of videos on the filmmaking business and the publishing business, which I've been doing, as a matter of fact. And I've released a couple of videos so far, and you know, these two series are going to go on parallel, but the point I want to make is that I had been planning for Saturday to release the first video on the film business. But instead of that, I decided to do a video essentially eulogizing Neil Peart, you know, and talking about why I thought he was significant. Certainly the fact he was a great drummer and maybe the greatest drummer of all time. That's a fool's errand to try to figure out who's the greatest of all time at anything. He was just a really, really great drummer, full stop. But more than that, to me at least, was his resilience, his endurance, especially in the face of tremendous hardships. Hardships he suffered when he was young, but most especially hardships he suffered when he was an older man. And that really hit me hard. The fact that the guy, when he was like 45 or so, his 19-year-old daughter, his only daughter, died in a horrible car crash. And then less than a year later, his wife died from cancer, which he himself described really as apathy. Suicide by apathy, he called it. And how that had affected him, and how he had gone away for a couple of years trying to pull himself together, and he'd succeeded. He'd come back to his band, Rush, and kept on making music, kept on touring. He'd gotten even better as an artist, as a musician. It was a remarkable comeback story, I thought. And then I went on to discuss how he had gone out with style, with class. He'd called an end to his career as a musician in 2015 because he had realized that his body just couldn't deliver the performance that he wanted, and that he had a standard, and that he wanted to live up to that standard. And if he couldn't live up to that standard, he wasn't going to, you know, continue trying to be something that he wasn't. He wasn't going to make a fool of himself. He wasn't going to be a self-parody, like unfortunately so many rock musicians turn out, and they keep on going at it when, you know, it's long past their due date, and they didn't know how to exit gracefully. But Neil Peart exited gracefully back in 2015, and then the tragedy to learn that just a year later he was diagnosed with brain cancer, which he kept to himself with dignity, with class, and he didn't tell anybody until the announcement of his death. And I thought that that was such a remarkable series of lessons that this man taught. A man whom I had admired since I was a boy, since I was 12, 13 years old, when I first listened to Rush's music, and when I was just captivated and blown away by this pyrotechnic drummer. I played guitar, so I was always more of an Alex Lifeson fan. You know, I mean, I respected Neil Peart's craftsmanship as a lyricist. I didn't think his lyrics were that great. Some of them were very good, but a lot of it was kind of clumsy. And some of his musicianship I thought sometimes was a little bit overly flashy, but I still respected him enormously because of that work ethic, that discipline, that endurance. And like I said, as an older man, I appreciate that more. Because as you get older, you become more fragile, quite frankly. You know, the hits, they hurt more. Yeah. And it takes longer to get over them. You know, the physical hits and the emotional hits. And it takes a long time to get over some stuff sometimes. And so I looked at Neil Peart as a man to emulate. The way he carried himself in his profession, always struggling to improve, always reaching for more, for better. And then when it was time to go, he knew it was time to go, and he, you know, hung up his drumsticks at the right time, and how he had overcome the terrible tragedies that he'd suffered. You know, I just thought that he was a remarkable man. And at the end of my video about him, To tell you the truth, it was rather embarrassing. I started to tear up. I wasn't quite finished with the video, and I didn't think that I would be able to finish it out if I paused the recording and re-recording the end, because I was really overcome with emotion. The surprise of the loss of this man just really affected me, and it hit me in a way that really surprised me. I think it might have surprised a lot of other people, not my reaction rather, but the death of Neil Peart, the reaction online and news articles and whatnot. I think a lot of people were caught really flat-footed, and I think a lot of people felt the way that I did, that he had been a man in full, a man that you could really respect, which is a rare thing nowadays, because there aren't many men that you can really respect, who are really not spotless, but just cool, just really cool, just really on the money, just, you know, guys who are just aces. There are very few of them, very, very few of them. And I think that that's the thing that struck everybody about the death of Neil Peart. And it certainly struck me. And I started to tear up because I thought it was such a tragedy. I could empathize with his loss, even though I'd never suffered anything as horrifying as his losses. And I could just admire and respect his endurance, his perseverance. And the fact that he had died, it just really hurt me. And I started to tear up. And I'm not tearing up now. I just swallowed something the wrong way. Excuse me. But I wanted to do this video because what happened was that I put up that video about Neil Peart. And I got some flack from trolls who were saying that I was being a hypocrite. Because you see, I did a video a while back criticizing Jordan Peterson. Because Jordan Peterson, apparently, his wife got cancer. And to deal with this, he started on antidepressants and other medication, and he got addicted to it. Apparently severely addicted to it, to the point where he wound up at a rehabilitation clinic. And he was in rehab trying to kick his habit, and it must have been pretty bad if you think about it, that he had to go to rehab for it. Okay, fine. You know, I personally think that if you're having a stressful time, as I have had stressful times, you should not be taking medication. You should not be taking booze. You should face it and just deal with it, you know, because anesthetizing difficulties solves nothing, because the pain is still going to be there. And the fact that you're anesthetizing yourself might make you slower to react, might make you not react when you should be reacting. You see what I'm saying? So anyway, I criticized him not because of his medication, his addiction problem. Rather, I criticized him because after he came out of rehab, he was fool enough to do an interview that lasted a full hour. And in that interview, he was very clearly a man in severe emotional distress. From the very beginning, the man looked like he was about to fall apart right there. And it was something shocking, because nobody had ever seen him like that before. And it was foolish, I thought. And I said so. I did a video saying that it had been foolish for him to do that interview because he just was not in the emotional space, the headspace, to do that interview. He clearly looked very, very troubled, and he came to tears when he talked about the fact that people said mean tweets about him, okay? And I mocked him for it. I mocked him for it because I thought it was just unacceptable as a man. Because I thought to myself that, you know, if you're in a bad emotional space, which we have all been in, you should never expose yourself like that. You should never, you know, allow yourself to be seen like that, because it just shows weakness and it opens you up to your enemies. And I said that there was nothing wrong, of course, with showing emotion. On the contrary, you should show emotion. The idea of like, yo, I'm a tough man and I never show emotion, that's stupid. I've always said that. And I've always said that, you know, if you need to cry, cry, but cry to your pillow in your darkened bedroom with no one else around. I also said that there were times when it was perfectly acceptable for a man to cry. For instance, the death of someone young or somebody that you loved. or the death or a great loss of some sort, or the memory of such a great loss, it's perfectly fine. And the idea of never crying, that's silly, that's stupid. That's for faux tough guys, fake tough guys, okay? Because real tough guys know that sometimes there are some emotions and there are moments when you have to weep over some tragedy, some loss. It might be a personal loss, or it might be the loss of an ideal or of some possibility of some sort. But there are certainly moments to cry. And so I was certainly not embarrassed by the fact that I teared up at the end of my video about Neil Peart. I wasn't embarrassed at all. Well, let me phrase it. I was a little embarrassed, but I didn't think I had it in me to re-record it or re-record the end of the video. And at the same time, I realized I didn't want to, because I wanted to make it clear how much he meant to me. And that the words that I had been saying for the previous 20-odd minutes of that video, they weren't just dispassionate words. I wasn't just, doing a video to make content. He mattered. He mattered a lot to me. And the fact of the matter is, after I did the video, before I got this criticism of being a hypocrite, I thought to myself that maybe I should put snippets of his lyrics in the video, of me reciting those lyrics, because I knew them. I know them all. Sad to say, or proud to say, I don't know. I can't quite figure it out yet, but I can recite most of Rush's lyrics from the very first album to the very last album. But a lot of people criticize me because I'd been critical of Jordan Peterson for having been an emotional wreck in that interview that he did. And me criticizing Jordan Peterson, but then sort of weeping at the end of my Neil Peart video. And I thought a lot about it, and it bothered me. I won't lie. It certainly bothered me, this thing of being a hypocrite. But then I thought about it some more. And I realized something that, when I did my video on Neil Peart, I was perfectly in control of my emotions. I was perfectly in control of my emotions, and I felt great sadness when I did the video. But I was not in a bad emotional space, not at all. I was just very sad that this man, whom I never met, but who had touched me so deeply with his work and his example. That's the thing that touched me the most about him, his example. Not his work, but the man he was. I felt so sad because of his death. And I didn't realize until the very end of that recording of that video that his death, that sadness, was not just oh, that's too bad. No. It was it really hurt me. His loss was real pain to me. And so I cried a little bit. I'm not ashamed of it. And then I compared what I had done, crying a little bit at the end of this video about Neil Peart, somebody whom I admired and respected. And I contrasted it with Jordan Peterson, who, like I said, in that video interview that he did, an hour-long interview where he was clearly out of sorts, I thought that there was no comparison at all. In one, there was a man very sad about the death of somebody who you respected, whose sadness ultimately expressed itself in a few tears. And then on the other hand, there was a man who was clearly out of sorts, with very severe emotional issues, who never should have exposed himself out in public. On the contrary, by exposing himself out in public, he made a fool of himself. And he made people who had previously respected him think less of him, not because of the emotions he was expressing, but rather because he did not have the foresight or the self-knowledge to recognize that he was in no shape to be out in public discussing things of any importance. He was in no emotional shape to be out there lecturing people. He was just not in that shape at all. And so that's when I realized that I had not been a hypocrite. And it bothered me, these people who called me a hypocrite. I think that whenever you see somebody say one thing, that you shouldn't or should do something or other, and then later you see them contradict themselves, you should look carefully at the apparent contradiction. If it truly is a contradiction, if it truly is hypocrisy, then call them out. But if at a glance you can recognize the different circumstances, then you have to recognize that life is more complex. You know, things cannot be that tidy. To say that, oh, you know, if it's outside of these parameters, then it's wrong. No, because a lot of times those parameters have to accept exceptions. A simple example, you know, if I'm walking down the street and there's some Joe Smith there, and I take out a gun and shoot Joe Smith, I'm a murderer. But if I see Joe Smith with a, you know, a switchblade or something, some knife, and he's slashing at a child, you know, trying to cut that child's throat, yeah? Some 5-year-old child, and Joe Smith is a grown-ass man, and he's with a knife trying to slash at a child, trying to kill the child. Of course I'm going to blow Joe Smith away. Of course I will, without a second's hesitation. Is that murder? Certainly not. Of course not. Everybody would say the same thing. And say you were defending a 5-year-old child from a crazy man. And that would be that. Circumstances. Circumstances matter. Context matters. Nuance matters. If somebody wants to say that I'm a hypocrite because I've done one thing and said another, that's perfectly fine. But it's only fine insofar as the context and the circumstances are completely described. They are completely articulated. I wanted to do this video because, like I said, it bothered me. It bothered me, but now that I've done this video, it doesn't bother me anymore. Because saying out loud the differences in the circumstances, it makes it clear that I was not a hypocrite at all. I was just truly sad that somebody I respected and admired had passed away. And there's no shame in that. Or at least I don't think so. And as far as I'm concerned, what I think matters, and what some troll thinks or says does not matter at all. Okay, sorry for wasting your time, but I just really wanted to get this off my chest. Take it easy.